You know, in Genesis, well, if you'd like to get out your Bible app with me, God said, let us make mankind, really humankind, let us make humankind in our image, in our likeness. And my sermon title today, who do you think you are? Now maybe some of us, myself included, have heard that question with a little bit of a different emphasis throughout our lives. And who do you think you are? Or if I translate to Oklahoma vernacular, just in case you're not from around here, are you getting too big for your own britches? Which of course is another way of saying, now listen to this because this is some truth right here, which is another way of saying, stop what you're doing or being right now because it doesn't fit my expectation of you. Right? Well. So how you answer the question, who you think you are, matters. Try this. You have a pen? If not, there's little plastic things in the pew back, so you might be able to nab a pencil. I'm going to give you about a minute of silence, and I'm going to ask you to finish a sentence as many times as you can, over and over and over. Don't interrupt yourself. Just write free flow of thought. And it is, I am, and then blank. Whatever it is. I am. I am. Do it as many times as you can. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. Should I say something to our podcast listeners? You should do this too. Keep doing this. Yep. There you go. As many times as you can. Keep writing. Okay. So if you made it to 20, you will have completed something called the 20 statements test. You can do this again later. But I think it's important for you to have a few of those in front of you as I give you the explanation. This is actually a well-known, long-standing psychological and social psychological assessment that helps to uncover how we craft our own identity. Now, some of my answers were mother, wife, minister, child of God, writer, musician, curious, cranky, out of shape, creative, someone who likes to eat dinner of Pringles and wine. Maybe you have some of the same answers. That's the entree and the appetizer and the dessert. The creators of this assessment actually sort the responses into 4 different categories, an A, a B, a C, and a D. I'm going to tell you about them. The A mode responses are the type of physical characteristics, kind of like what you would find on your driver's license, right? I am a brunette, I am tall, I am an Oklahoma resident. B mode responses describe socially defined statuses usually associated with group membership of some sort. I am a college student or graduate. I am a theist. I am American. I am a cancer survivor. C mode responses describe styles of behavior or emotional states. I am happy or depressed. I am a gospel music fan. I am a fashionable dresser. D mode responses are more general than individual. I am part of the universe. I am a human being. Now this test was actually used by Louis Zurcher to study the changing self-images of Americans. And what he found was that in the 1960s, individuals were more likely to give B mode responses, the socially defined statuses. And in the 70s and 80s, people switched and were more likely to give C mode responses, those behavior or emotional state responses. What about you? What about now? Those with the more B mode responses base their self-concept on group membership and institutional roles. Those with more C mode responses see themselves as more independent and define themselves according to their individual actions and emotions rather than their connections to others. But even if you gave yourself more B mode responses this morning, the predominant mode still to this day is usually C. It is likely that there are a few, if any, people whose responses fall predominantly in the A or the D categories. Those with more A responses might feel that they have only a skin-deep understanding of self-concept, based more on their appearance to others than their actual internal qualities. Those with more D mode responses are harder to categorize and may feel uncertain about the source of their sense of self. Now, I've always been really curious about that tipping point, about when we claim an identity. As in, how many times do you have to run to be called a runner? Just where or how do you need to sing before you can consider yourself a singer? Or bake to be a baker? Do you have to earn money doing it? Can it be a hobby? You see how complicated this can be? And we have a tendency to judge ourselves against a professional standard and to give everyone else the benefit of the hobby standard, right? So just pay attention. There are powerful times to claim an identity. For example, I am a cancer survivor is a very strong statement. Or I am divorced. Or even I am a Christian, depending upon what company you are keeping. But there are other times when we feel boxed in by these very same identities. So with this kind of uncertainty, religion has been a place where we've come to bind our story to a larger one. Church is a place where we can come and weave our stories and identities together to create an even larger one. It's interesting because the word image refers to a representation or a perception. Let us make mankind in our own image, in our likeness. The Latin imago also means the final stage of metamorphosis. The final stage of metamorphosis. Our identities are always in transformation. They're made up of our thoughts and our feelings and our experiences, all mixed up with an understanding of how other people experience us. When you say I am, it's actually showing more of a location in space and time right now in your own spirit. And there's some work that we do in cultural competency that says that the first one that you wrote down might be the one that's most under threat. Go ahead and look. The one that you might want to assert more often. It's interesting because we craft an image of ourselves, a story with ourselves as the main character as we encounter each other and the world. We may not be able to choose all the facts that make up that story, but we determine what facts we emphasize and which facts we de-emphasize. Which parts of our story become main events and which parts fade into the background. But the fact is that this church is here to remind you that you are not one single event, mistake, or action in your life. You can clap to that. What is the real story? According to sociologist W.I. Thomas, if a person perceives a situation as real, then it is real in its consequences. This is also known as the Thomas theorem. In other words, our behavior depends not on the objective reality of a situation, but on our subjective interpretation of that reality. The consequences and the results make it real. People perceive reality very differently. And when they decide how they're going to view a person or a situation, they act accordingly. And we, in turn, if we do not take back the pen of authorship, will act in response to how other people are perceiving us. So people start thinking, oh, that teenager, he's a deviant. Guess what we start doing? Deviant behavior, right? You get labeled, and it's almost like you've given up on yourself. You take on that description and just put it right on. Now, it's interesting because our definition of a situation as good or bad, as to be embraced or avoided, dictates our response to it. And so we have to seek to understand how other people are perceiving reality. What is their story? Instead of trying to persuade them that what we are experiencing is right. We can get curious about how it is that they see the very same thing that we see. And we need people in our lives who will honor our experience first before trying to change our minds. Now, the power to write our own story can feel to some like having the keys to our own kingdom. And to others, it can feel like the power to write our own story can feel like carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. But we get to decide that too. Is it a freedom or a burden? You see, we can embrace the freedom and the responsibility, or simply go along with the culture's definition, with other people's definition of the meaning of life, of the meaning of our lives, of what is good or right or valuable, or how we should spend our days. This is, in fact, the existential crisis of the human experience: to claim our own power in shaping our experience, or to be a cog in a wheel of the systems of which we are a part. You know what I'm talking about? Now, I don't know where you're going to be at 8 o'clock tonight, but I can tell you where I'm going to be. My phone's going to be off. Yep, and I'm going to be in front of the television watching the series finale of Breaking Bad. Is anybody else going to be doing that too? Oh, yeah, okay. See, can I get a witness? It's interesting because we've got to watch, this concept of identity and the main character. For those of you who aren't watching it, you might have heard on NPR. You might have gotten caught up on NPR this morning on your way in. But it's about Walter White, a chemistry teacher who chose to become a meth kingpin in order to leave his family a legacy of money after he was diagnosed with cancer, terminal cancer. And he makes one compromise after another until finally, by this season, the Walter White of season 1 would not recognize the Walter White of this season. And so there's all of these interesting dichotomies about when do we choose to compromise our values, and what does it mean for our own identity. It's fascinating. So get it on Netflix if you haven't seen it. They didn't pay me for that. Maybe you've seen another, definitely not as good in my humble opinion, television show on TLC called Who Do You Think You Are? Now, this is based on a British show of the same name. The premise is that celebrities traipse across the country researching their genealogy. Cameras follow them as they uncover the larger story of their family, usually with a Hollywood-emphasized surprise that highlights some characteristic that celebrity already had, or some hidden interest is explained. But the premise is has much more potential than the actual delivery, I'm sorry to say, so that one I'm not going to recommend. But it does bring up a very interesting point, and that is that we are products of our DNA. We are products of our story, of our biology, and at a molecular level, we're even products of the universe, crafted from the dust of stars. So if we look at a systems theory from its largest lens, zoomed outward, we are not only the universe looking back upon itself, or you could even say children of God looking up to God even, right? But we are also products and representations of every single system of which we are a part. So I hold in this identity the pieces of these larger systems of my gender and my sexual orientation, my ethnicity, my religion, my family, my education, profession, political persuasion. Every group of which I've ever been a part shows up in a way in me. We are parts of the whole. And we each hold a piece of the whole of God within us. That interconnectedness of systems is infinite. And so we can learn more about ourselves by learning more about our history, our family's history, our city, state, nation's history, right? But quantum physics tells us that these interrelated and interconnected systems affect one another in amazing ways, even when the parts of the systems appear to be really distant from one another. So for example, women across the world form a system, and women in China form a subsystem of that system. You with me so far? Yeah. So due to the nature of these, we can know that whatever impacts Chinese women will in some way impact women across the world. Are you with me? Because they're part of a system that's part of a larger system, right? Another way to consider this is something called macrocosm-microcosm principle. This holds that in a living system, the characteristics and force fields that exist in the whole are recapitulated in every single part of its subsystem. A good example is DNA, right? DNA that makes up the human body is contained in every single cell in the body, and scientists need only a scrap of skin or a drop of body fluid to determine the genetic makeup of the entire body. Chinese medicine and the practice of Qigong and reflexology actually assert that this is true, even for parts of the body, right? The hands and the feet, they believe, reflect the whole within them. And so treating the hands or the feet can have benefits to the whole. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm and vice versa. And so I am a manifestation of all of the systems of which I'm a part, and so are you. The danger is when we assume that that is all we are, a piece of a bigger system. I am never just a minister. I am never just an American, or just a Unitarian, or just Caucasian, or just a mother, or just a wife, or just the daughter of someone with PTSD. And you are not just divorced, or just widowed, or just your profession or disease, or just a felony, or just one bad choice in your life. And neither is the person in front of us merely a representation of a single category alone. We have to be in relationship to understand how that system is manifesting in the person who stands before us. I am who I am, God says. Right? I am who I am. So how will you get to know me? We learn in the Bible how we're supposed to get to know people. How? By my fruits. By my fruits ye shall know me. Yes? But not just one fruit. Fruit. But this tree and yours, I would assume, has a lot of different kind of fruit. Have you seen those trees in the catalogs in the airplane? You can get a tree, one single tree, with multiple citrus fruits, or 4 different kinds of apples, or all kinds of different stone fruit, like peaches and plums, and all on the same tree. Isn't that amazing? That was co-created with us and God right there. But just because all you see is an orange doesn't mean that that's all there is, right? And so what are we to do? I would argue that the most radical, most empowered thing that we can do is pay attention to who we think we are and who we think others are, and increase the amount of compassion and our willingness to accept complexity. Not making assumptions. If your wife has forever liked ranch dressing and tomorrow she wants honey mustard, by God, it's okay. It's okay. I'm telling that to myself. You know, Jill came home one day. And I was serving something, and I put ranch dressing on the table, and she goes, I don't like ranch dressing. It's like, for the past 17 years, you've liked ranch dressing. It's like she pulled a card out of my house of cards, and everything fell with a bottle of dressing. Right? No. Greet the person as the complex becoming that they are. And greet yourself that way. When we take on the challenge of owning the responsibility of authoring our lives, of not letting an identity be a fixed moment in time, but a process unfolding, right? We are not merely subsets of a larger system, but whole ourselves, authors of our own lives that we are co-creating with God. Co-creating with God. Now, I also believe that we need to find some champions in this life, people who can hold the ambiguity of our multiple identities, people who are not going to hold us to being ranch dressing liking people. In Matthew 16, Jesus comes to Caesarea Philippi and he asks his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" And they reply, "Well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others say Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Peter. You know I love me some Peter. Peter got it right? Peter was able to see the possibility and the potential. What does Peter say? The rock. Peter's the rock. Peter gets it, right? Peter doesn't confine him to his past. Peter doesn't confine him to what has happened up to this point. Peter says, "You are what is to come. You are what is to come." So who's your Peter? Who's the Peter in your life? Who can identify you becoming in the midst of all of that noise? It might be your spouse, but it doesn't have to be. It might be a family member or a friend or a therapist or a minister. Now, I've done 2 weddings in the past week, which means that when I did my little list of I ams, I probably should have written, "I am an officiant." But this reading was actually in both of them, and it spoke to me tremendously in both weddings, and I wanted to share it with you. It's called Love by Roy Croft. He writes, "I love you not only for what you are, but for who I am when I am with you. I love you not only for what you have made of yourself, but for what you are making of me. I love you for the part of me that you bring out. I love you for putting your hand into my heaped up heart and passing over all the foolish, weak things that you couldn't help dimly seeing there, and for drawing out into the light all the beautiful belongings that no one else had looked quite far enough to find. I love you because you are helping me to make of the lumber of my life not a tavern, but a temple. Out of the works of my everyday, not a reproach, but a song. I love you because you have done more than any creed could have done to make me good, and more than any fate could have done to make me happy. You have done it without a touch, without a word, without a sign. You have done it by being yourself. When we are surrounded by people who either cannot see us as more than just simply one thing, or when we're surrounded by people who cannot acknowledge the complexity of who we are, we begin to believe them. We begin to shrink in our understanding of ourselves. When we don't have a mirroring from someone else of our complexity, Julia Cameron writes, part of us knows that we're more than they see, and part of us fears that we're less than we hope we are. All of us need believing mirrors, like so many fairy tales suggest, reflecting possibility, not improbability. These mirrors are held up by people who are large enough and expansive enough not to be threatened by someone else's ambiguity. Do you have someone in your life who can see you for more than a single identity? Who can hold your complexity? Who stopped using the words always and never in your presence? If we are to lead awakened lives, and bear the responsibility of crafting a story of our lives that matters. We need these kind of people in our lives. Someone like Peter, who doesn't hold us to the history but looks forward to the future, who can draw out into the light all those beautiful belongings that no one else had looked quite far enough to find. Someone who can help you to make of the lumber of your life not a tavern but a temple, out of the works of your everyday not a reproach but a song. And the best way to find someone like this in your life is to be one. Amen. Amen.